So just giving you an overview of the experience, again, we said we were in Stuttgart, Germany. We're in Stuttgart. Stuttgart's in the southwest corner of Germany, which kind of puts you smack dab in the center of Europe, which was awfully nice for travel. We worked, again, at Max Planck Institute. It's slightly different than anything that we have really over here. It wasn't a university setting, even though they're associated with a university. It is a government-funded research institute, and so just a very unique setting to be in. And it wasn't really inside of the heart of Stuttgart. It was actually outside in kind of like this Renaissance setting in the woods where you could only think about science. So we were very isolated, and we were next to this small little village called Busnau, and we stayed actually on the site. They have a guest house where visiting scholars come in because it's just not conducive to like staying in hotels or anything, because there's nothing else out there besides the institute. We were there for approximately 10 weeks, and we're going to go into that a little bit more later on in the talk, but 10 weeks sounds like a long time, but when you've got a deadline to walk out with the completed project, it goes fast. And our group was the New Materials and Biosystems kind of overarching group. We were specifically in Dr. Spatz's group. They actually called it Group Spatz. And then our leader that we worked very closely with, who I would say here equivalent to our advisor, was Dr. Ralph Kemkemer, and he was huge on our success of this experience. So you do all this preparation, you've got this project, you're super excited. I as a third year, had a lot of projects that I had to keep moving forward since I work with living tissues and cells and animals and whatever. I had 15 spreadsheets and 3 undergrads overseeing everything, and Sam's not quite even comfortable in her own lab, but it is somewhat of a comfort zone. You know where you're coming from, you know how to use all your equipment, you think you're ready, and then all of a sudden you moved out of that comfort zone, you're dropped in the middle of nowhere in Germany, and you're supposed to be dealing with all of these new things that are thrown at you. The language is new, the culture is new, the equipment is new. You think you know how to do something, they have a completely different protocol how to do it, and you have to figure out where the commonalities are. You really have to know your stuff. And the challenges are new. I'm a third year. I'm pretty independent here, and I go there, and now I'm completely dependent on them. Computers, all the prompts come up in German. I mean, it's a completely different setting, and it was more challenging, I think, than either of us really knew, because of all the preparation that went into it. You kind of feel like, yeah, I got this, we're ready, and then you get there and you're like, what just happened? And maybe part of that was jet lag, but basically we knew we weren't in our comfort zone, and it was going to be a quick 10 weeks, and we had a lot to accomplish, and so you had to quickly assimilate a new level of comfort with your new setting. And as any biologist knows, you really aren't going to reach your full potential until you stress a system, and this was it. This was our stress, and I think hopefully we can convey how much it accelerated our growth and excitement about what we do.
Okay, so as Heather just mentioned, we're out of our comfort zone, and part of the main thing that we did to combat this was build ourselves a new community. So something I think that we might take for granted here at Illinois is the community that we have. And I'm not just referring to your lab and your project and your advisor, but also an entire campus full of on-campus collaborators and peers and professors and equipment, materials, supplies, etc. Everything you know where it is generally, and you know at least who to talk to find what you need. But here we were completely removed from our working environments and starting again from the ground up. So I'll touch on this again later, but this is one of the many reasons that 10 weeks felt extremely short. So where did we start? We started with exercising or starting to utilize our new resources, for example, the people, all of which were extremely helpful and welcoming, especially Dr. Kemkemer, who was absolutely went over and above what you would expect of any traditional collaborator in terms of making us feel welcome and assimilated into their environment as fast as possible so we could start working. Getting to know the facilities, the equipment, Heather mentioned things being in German, different languages, kind of having to deal with this and somehow figure out how to use the same microscope you might use here, but it's just very, very different. The software is different. And getting around the institute and the town and learning how to do that. Another thing that Heather kind of touched on was the fact that we were in a research institute, which is actually very, very different than a lab on campus, on a university campus. For one thing, they keep a very much more consistent schedule, and I think all of us can attest to being here. Sometimes we have very sporadic schedules. We work very different hours from day to day, work evenings, weekends, sometimes holidays, and times that other people might be taking off. But there, the times were much more strictly regimented. Not to say, actually, some of the safety training mandated that we weren't allowed to be in the labs after hours if you were by yourself. You had to be, technically you were supposed to be with someone, so in case something were to happen. So this is just a very different environment in terms of time and scheduling. So if you wanted to use a specific resource, if you needed to talk to a specific person, you needed to learn how to use a piece of equipment for your project, you had to time it such that you could do it during this window of time when other people were available, which was something very, very new for us. So as a result of all these things and building up our new community, our projects had to adapt, and this was also an interesting experience. So again, as Heather mentioned, we had gone through months of planning. We had already talked to our advisors that we were to have there before we left and planned out our project. But there are just some unforeseen things that you don't know about until you get there. And so in finding the right resources, for example, I learned that it's one thing to have the best equipment, but it is a very, very different thing to know how to use it for what you want to do. So we had conversations about what type of camera and what microscope I would be using, and I arrived there and learned that no one had used it for the type of work that I wanted to do before. So now, all of a sudden, it's my responsibility to install this camera and find the software that would properly talk with it, and also do this with some German computer prompts. So this was very interesting for me, and it kind of forced me to adapt my project in a new way so I could continue to progress while I was also working on that, which I hadn't expected to do. Some other things, networking, not being afraid to go out and find people that you didn't know or didn't even know if you would speak your language to help you out. And also, just because we were visiting students didn't mean that there was always someone there watching for us and being able to answer our questions on the spot. So we kind of had to learn how to make decisions at a faster pace so that we didn't lose time in the scheme of our project. We were only there for 10 weeks, so if the person you needed to ask wasn't available, or if the materials weren't in that you needed, you had to be able to make some decisions as to how to morph your project and continue to progress. So I think some take-home points for both of us were being able to take ownership, really take ownership of a project. And just as you would hear when you're faced with things like equipment being reserved for weeks and you need to use it to do your project, or different things not being available to you, what do you do in those instances? And also establishing a new level of independence, being isolated from all of your peers and professors, but also your friends and your own community, your support group that you use when things aren't going your way. So as a beginning student, I think this was really important for me to experience and learn how to combat for the rest of my time here at Illinois. Something else that we learned, I know we've mentioned this work schedule a few times already, and so I think it can emphasize how much of an adjustment it was for us. And because of this, we were sort of able to gain a new perspective on efficiency in research and prioritizing your work day such that you could get the majority of your work done during set hours for an entire Monday through Friday. So because of this, we had some opportunities to travel on the weekends. We were able to see some parts of Europe, which was really amazing. And that's what also put this experience above and beyond what you would see on paper in terms of research. So, and also an interesting result of this was that we found some increased enthusiasm and productivity when we returned the following Monday. And that's not to say we didn't work any weekends or evenings, but for the most part, we were able to prioritize what we did to be effective during that Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And I think that's definitely something that we can take back here and implement in our research. And
one thing I just wanted to add to the slide is just that I think that kind of in this, I don't know, Walmart culture of science is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the United States, and that is definitely not what it's like over there. Here it's like more is better. Just keep doing more and more and more and more. If I stay longer, it's a badge of honor. I've been here longer than anybody else. I'm working harder, and I think, I mean, I like to consider myself still an athlete, and I understand the concept of you grow most during your rest periods, and I don't apply that to other areas of my life. And it wasn't until we basically were told, you're not supposed to be here when other people aren't here, and tomorrow's holiday, don't come in, that Sam and I would go out, and it was just the conversations that happened outside of the lab. I think we both surprised ourselves in realizing that more isn't better, better is better, and we're actually excited about what we do because we're taking time away from that to kind of process it. And the conversations as we're on a train to Vienna overnight were sometimes about science, which was weird. I don't think we do that very often, and it just brought in a new perspective when you went back into the lab. And I just think I know for myself, I can speak for myself, my 3 years here, you kind of just get so focused on what you're doing, and you can do it 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that you just kind of lose the perspective that can be gained from those times of unplugging. So that was one of my major lessons in Europe.
So finally, speaking to the length of our experience here, 10 weeks sounds long, and it's virtually the entire summer, but actually it goes by really, really fast. And so what was interesting was that Heather and I, our visits were staggered about 2.5, 3 weeks. She arrived a little bit after I did, and also left after I did. But we both found that the majority of our experiments took place in the last 10 or so days that we were there. And part of that is that learning that every second counts, and when you have this finite time period, and we cannot just go back there and repeat more experiments if we need to, really forces you to plan ahead and work now, but also be consistently planning ahead. And another thing is that unpredictable things can happen in any lab. It's not just to say that because we had planned out our experience, everything was going to go as planned. Things happen there just as they do here. We had an incubator of contamination. We had shipments that didn't come in, and equipment that was reserved when we need to use it. These are all things that you need to figure out how to combat so that you can progress during these undoubtedly experienced downtimes in research. So ultimately, 10 weeks ended up being just enough for us to accomplish not only learning the techniques, but also executing experiments, which I think the fact that we were able to complete and execute those really adds a value to the collaboration, because while the experience itself was great, coming back with data and coming back with a semi-complete project was really valuable and continues the relationship with our collaborators from here forward.
And so, I mean, we started off saying, what is the IGERT? And it's, integrative science and collaborations outside your field and thinking in new, novel ways. And I think we thought we knew what that was before we started this experience. And I'm not saying that it completely changed, but it just became more robust. I mean, we had the opportunity not only to sit down and talk with biophysicists, material scientists, mechanical engineers, muscle physiologists to come and look at similar problems and questions that we have, but we actually were working alongside them. And so it wasn't just that you had people that had their expertise and we kind of bring back those questions to our lab and we again put our heads down and focus and do what we do well, which is great. But we were able to come together and work on a project together so that we had one complete project that we all had ownership of. And it wasn't just kind of throwing those expertise components together in the end to try to come up with a story. And that, to me, was a real collaboration that doesn't happen a lot. And we felt very honored to get to have that type of an experience.
Yeah, and I think another part of that is the collaboration that Heather touched on earlier while we were traveling and having these opportunities to have candid discussions with me, an engineer, and Heather, a biologist, things that in our setting here you don't really have time for all the time when you need to. So there was a lot of value in that, and something that surprised I think both of us was that this long-lasting collaboration that we had developed with just ourselves, having a resource now here back on campus when we've returned and had these experiences together, someone to reach out to in the future. And I think that's something that I least expected. I was planning to get this experience of establishing a collaboration internationally, but with someone on my own campus, I had not expected this. So this was kind of exciting and something that I think brought real extra value to the trip.
And there are a lot of components to the IGERT that kind of try to foster this type of this collaboration. And I'm not saying that the seminars aren't great, and I don't know, the different social things that we do every once in a while, which we need to do, and I'm in charge of that. But I think that just like us sitting down, I felt like a 5-year-old when I was listening to her, because she'd be like, and then I can measure this and quantitate this and do that. And I'm like, but why? Who cares? But why? Who cares? But why? Who cares? And that, like, the goal of having leaders that are doing novel things but able to communicate with each other, it's that I feel like, again, we were using concepts from each other's fields, but then you go back and you publish in your own journals again and use the language that neither of us understand. And we were forced to sit there because at times, I mean, they spoke English, yes, but I spent the majority of my time with Sam. I mean, we had our own lab, actually a couple labs of our own, which was awesome. But it was day in and day out, it was Sam and I was interested in what she was doing, and we were traveling and talking about it, and it really brought us together in a way that I don't know. I think it's exactly what IGERT wanted. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So I know not everybody in this room is an IGERT fellow, and I wish that you were, because this is an amazing experience. But we just want to encourage you to look for those types of opportunities. Get yourself out of your lab. Try not to work so hard with tunnel vision. Work smarter and realize that better is better, not more is better. And put yourself in areas where you're not comfortable, and you have to communicate your science in a way that you don't have to in your own field, because everybody comes with this general knowledge about it. And that's, I feel like, again, that real collaboration that Sam and I had that hopefully we can continue on. So there's really no way to thank everybody that made this possible. It took a village to get us there, and there were a lot of bumps and stuff along the way, but I'm thankful that we both put the work in ahead of time, because there was a lot of work that went into it ahead of time to allow us to be able to go. I'm thankful for both of our lab groups that supported us being there and leaving those holes in our lab groups. I'm thankful for Laura and for Dr. Bashir and for the IGERT executive committee that really supported and wanted this to be a longer experience, and especially for Dr. Kim Kemmer and his group, and Max Planck and everybody that supported us, because I mean, the whole summer we were just like, how is this happening to us? Like, you knew in the moment that it was one of those things that is going to change not only you as a person, but you professionally, and kind of all of the above. So just thank you to everybody that made it possible. And yeah, thank you, IGERT, for funding it. That was nice. And then we're open for any questions that you guys might have.